It's, as I said, it's 7:08. We're here to talk about the Convention of States Initiative. And let me welcome to Hudson Valley Focus Live for the first time, Silver Dreaming Wolf, New York State Convention of States point person, I guess is how we refer to you. Good morning.
Good morning, and it's State Director.
State Director. There we go. I knew it was something like that, but so
that's okay. I have many titles in Convention of States.
I'm sure you do, and of course you're up in the upstate New York, where you said it is now snowing, and I'm looking at the temperatures. I started here 3 hours ago at 62 degrees. It's now dropping, but boy, I see that just across the line in Canada, it's down to 7 degrees, and that cold front is, barreling in our direction. So winter.
I got 17. I'm happy.
There you go.
Anything above zero here is happy.
There you go. There you go. So what I'd like you to do, first of all, is explain your name to the listeners, please, and then we'll talk about the specifics of the Convention of States.
Sure, I'd be happy to. I'm Navajo and Scottish.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I wound up with the name Silver Dreaming Wolf. My father named me.
Wow.
And he was Navajo.
Now,
and it was lots of fun growing up with hi-ho silver, every other word out of people's mouths.
Now, are you still active in the Navajo community?
I'm a little far away to be active.
Okay. Well, that's true. That's true.
And, they're down in the Four Corners region where my family came from originally, but it's a long story. Let's just say I never really got to know my natural parents.
Okay. And then, I'm glad you're here with us today, and you're a state director. Let's explain, first of all, the Convention of States Initiative.
We call it the Convention of States Project. It was started by Mike Saris and Mark Meckler. You may know those names from the Tea Party. And what they realized was that Article 5, Section 2 of the Constitution gave every state the right to go through their state legislators, bypass Congress, and propose amendments to the Constitution. Now, that is in opposition of a constitutional convention, which for most people means literally changing the Constitution. We're not out to do that. We're not touching your Second Amendment rights. We're not touching your First Amendment rights. We're not touching any of your rights. What we're proposing is to add amendments to the Constitution to put term limits on all federal employees, tie the strings of the federal budget, and to bring the power back to the state that the federal government has co-opted from the states.
So let me back up to what you just said. You said term limits on all federal employees, not just elected officials?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's...
Those unelected bureaucrats are there for life, and if the president is term limited in Washington, D.C., everybody should be term limited in Washington, D.C.
Because that is what I have said to the listeners here on Hudson Valley Focus Live is an enormous problem. We really have developed in this country an unelected administrative state who has seized tremendous power and control. I mean, we saw this with the eviction moratoriums that Dr. Fauci and others put in place, and now the Supreme Court ruled that to be a violation of our Constitution. This parallels to what you're saying, right?
It absolutely does.
And this is a let me add to that, because this is a real problem, and I think it goes to laziness, lack of intellect, corruption on the part of our elected officials in Congress and the U.S. Senate. They get there. They have created over the decades these alphabet agencies, whether it's the IRS, the FDA, the NIH, the list is long. And the Congress is supposed to be the ones who exercise oversight and control, but they basically have left these agencies to run rampant over the rights of Americans, is how I see it. Your thoughts?
I believe the same thing, in all honesty. The federal government was put in place by our founding fathers for basically two reasons: to fix fights between the states and to handle foreign policy. And that's basically it. They were never meant to create agencies. They were never meant to write executive orders. They were never meant to co-opt powers that belong to the states. But over the years, and especially during and after World War II, that's exactly what they did.
Yes. Yes.
In World War II, there were donor states. Those were states like New York, coastal states, California, places where industry still took place. Whereas most of the soldiers came from the heartland of America where there was no industry that would compete for the war effort. Mm-hmm. And after these donor states, after World War II, these donor states never stopped being donor states. And that's why you see taxes so high in a lot of these states like New York and California, because we never stopped donating to the federal government. So there's over 60% of our New York State budget is dictated by the federal government. That money needs to stay here in New York. We shouldn't have to go begging to the feds every time something happens in New York State.
Yes, and of course, New York State has done a wonderful job of just upping the ante as well. But if I go back to 1913, the creation of the Federal Reserve, which is not a federal agency, it's a cartel of private bankers, and the, I guess, almost simultaneous creation of the income tax, I think that is accurate, and where they could just absolutely, under the rule of law, confiscate income from the working men and women across this country and reallocate that money. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, we don't concentrate that much on that kind of particular in Convention of States.
Okay.
But I do understand where you're coming from. I mean, we started a revolution over taxes, correct?
Yes.
Back in the day, and that's why we have our Declaration of Independence and our Constitution now. The Constitution started off as a document, as a framework document for us.
Correct.
It was never meant to be as big as it is today. The Supreme Court was never meant to create laws. Laws were meant to be created in Congress.
Correct.
And passed in Congress.
Correct.
They're the branch of government to make the laws. When you have other branches of government taking over that power, we know we're in a bad way.
So
we need to return back to the origins of the Constitution and due process and the way the founders envisioned our country.
So, I mean, to your point and why this becomes so critically important is I've often said that if we go back to just 1960 or maybe around the time when JFK was assassinated, 1963, the power, the control, the money of the governmental entities has grown by 50% and exercise power and control.
At least.
Yep. So, Silver, what I'd like to do is, Silver is the director for the Convention of States project here in New York. Let's take a quick break. And when we come back, I'd like to describe how this process is working. Where are we? What has to be done? And how do people participate?
You got it.
Back in a minute on WKIP. Hudsonville Focus Live. Back to my conversation with Silver Dreaming Wolf, the New York State Director of the Convention of States Project. I hope I got that correct that time. One of the listeners called in, and before you come back to the points I mentioned to you, want to ask, Mark Levin has been a very big proponent of the Convention of States Project, correct?
He has. It's actually a very funny story that Mark Meckler tells us about that. When Mark Levin was writing his Liberty Amendment book, it was completely under wraps, and that book is about Article 5, Section 2 of the Constitution. And Meckler and Farris came up with the idea of Article 5 right about the same time Mark was writing the book. And I'll never forget this story. Mark Meckler said he had called Mark Levin and said, hey, I got this great idea of calling it a Convention of States through Article 5 of the Constitution. And Levin's like, who told you about that? How do you know about that? Wait, because his book was under wraps, and he almost blew the cover on it. So we get a good laugh out of that every time we hear that.
very, very interesting for sure. So, in terms of the project, what are the thresholds that have to be met for this to happen? Now, I know when you and I spoke, and I had seen a news article that Nebraska, I think, was just the 17th state where the legislature voted to go ahead with this project. What are the thresholds, Silver?
Well, we're halfway there. 17 is the halfway mark. We need 34 states for Congress to call a convention. Once 34 states have all signed the exact same resolution that is in every state legislator in all 50 states right now, we hit 34, we call the convention. Then when 38 states are available to vote, we vote on the amendments that we would propose at the convention, which, again, go back to the term limits, fiscal restraints, and stopping government overreach and bringing the power back to the people.
So would those amendments be voted on individually versus just a package?
No, they would be voted on individually.
Okay.
Well, it would really depend on what they put as the confines on the convention when it's called. We have several resolutions as well that go along with the Convention of States resolution once it's passed. Mm-hmm. There's usually a good delegate resolution that goes along that will say they will vote for only these particular amendments, and this is what we want voted on, and this is how we'd like it done. So hopefully everybody gets there, is of the same mind. We vote individually, term limits for Congress, term limits for bureaucrats, fiscal restraints, what the fiscal restraints would be, what power would go back to the state. And once we have all of that voted on and passed at the convention, it goes back to the state legislators to be voted on again. And if everybody votes correctly, they become amendments to the Constitution.
So in terms of term limits, are there any lengths of terms being proposed in the Convention of States project?
Oh, we talk about it, and we do have a lot of great minds in our legal department that speak of it often. We are hoping to limit everybody to no more than 2-3 terms tops, capacity. It
is amazing to look back at where you can look at, terms of office that folks have been in, and then think about course our nation has been on over that time period, where we're talking about 30 and 40 and 50 years. And there are, a couple of the seats that have been handed down for 3 generations in the same family.
That's absolutely true, and this is one of the main reasons that we have the term limits in our resolution. Term limits, it's a very simple mathematical equation. If the president is limited to terms, everybody should be limited to terms. George Washington showed us the way when he stepped down. Personally, I think it should have been put in the Constitution a long time ago, term limits for everybody.
Well, I think
it never was meant to be a lifetime job. We were supposed to be doing our civic duty and coming back.
Yes, exactly. And the idea of the career politician who, and many of them basically just move to Washington and lose contact with their constituents anyway. And, but this was supposed to be, my understanding, the citizen legislators who were in fact the representatives. They lived and worked in their community and then would bring their voice to Washington on behalf of their citizens. Today, I forget what the latest amount of money is that's spent by the lobbyist in Washington. It is absolutely incredible. I mean, what we've looked at the last 2 years with COVID, with, pharmaceutical industry being, I think, the number one lobby organization there, how much policy has been set, or the teachers unions, where the citizens' voice has been silenced. And now, good God, I mean, what we see happening now with censorship through the media, electronic media, Twitter, Facebook, Google, we as a nation are losing our voice. The citizens are.
It's true. There's 9 basic words that were said over 100 years ago by Abraham Lincoln that people tend to forget. By the people, for the people, of the people.
Yes.
This is what Congress is supposed to represent.
So if
they do exactly what you say. They go to D.C. and they lose touch with their constituents, and you can see it in the states.
Yes, exactly.
When we elect state officials, they go to the state capitol, and that's it. Yes. We never see them again.
Nope. So Silver, how do folks learn more? We have 60 seconds left. How do folks learn more and sign up to help?
They go to conventionofstates.com.
Okay.
You can sign the petition right there. It pops right up. And after you've signed the petition, there is a little tab up top that says Take Action. If you click on that tab, you can scroll down, and all of our volunteer positions are listed with a brief description of what each job is. You are welcome to go ahead and click on any of those positions and put in an application, and you will probably get a call from me.
Very good. So, I want to thank you for spending time with us this morning, and we will have more conversations going forward, and thank you for the work that you're doing on behalf of the citizens.
Thank you for getting the word out. We appreciate it.
You're very welcome. 7:31. We'll take a quick break, and we'll come back and tell you a little bit more about that. 845-471-9547. If you didn't hear me say it before, we've got a weather front coming through. It was